And we're live. So, hello to everyone who's watching us live on Facebook and YouTube, and welcome to all of the RNCM staff and students who've joined us on Zoom. It's so lovely to see you. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Caroline Shaw, who is our esteemed guest for today. Caroline Shaw is a New York-based musician. She is a vocalist, violinist, composer, and producer who performs in solo and collaborative projects. She was the youngest recipient of the Pulitzer Prize for Music in 2013 for her piece Partita for Eight Voices, written for the Grammy-winning Roomful of Teeth, of which she is a member. Caroline has collaborated with everyone from filmmakers to choreographers to Kanye West to her houseplants. She currently teaches at NYU and is a creative associate at the Juilliard School. Caroline loves the colour yellow, otters, Beethoven Opus 74, Mozart opera, Kinhaven, the smell of rosemary, and the sound of a janky mandolin. So welcome, Caroline. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Anna, and all of you who I see in little rectangles. I'm good today. I was showing earlier my plant, which I think Paul and I have now named Sparky. Yeah.
And where are you in the world right now?
I am currently in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is about 3 hours northeast of New York City, and I live part-time in New York and part-time here now.
And has that been the same all year? Has this been where you've been based throughout the pandemic? What's been different for you this year? Has it been okay? What's been going on for you?
Oh, same old, just normal year. We started to come, my partner's from this area, so we ended up sort of subletting a place. And for a long time, I think for the first few months, it was really confusing. And I stopped writing altogether, not out of devastation or sadness, just like there's nothing to do. What if I used my brain in a different way? So it was a lot of walking. I think there's been a lot of walking in nature, a lot of being in the woods. And you and I were just talking a lot more electronic producing or home recording. I have a separate little microphone here. And I miss seeing people, hearing people live, and working with people in the room. But I'm grateful to have what I have. Yeah.
That's so lovely to hear about. Oh yeah, well, it's kind of been, I'm a composer as well, and I think for composers, we have a gift, which is that we are used to solitude in a way that some people aren't. But you're a performer as well, so you must be more used to gigging, touring, being around people a lot more. So it's very strange for musicians right now. Like you, I've been doing more producing and electronic music because you can actually hear sound then. So it's been a good opportunity for that. I'm so interested in kind of how diverse your styles and genres are, but that you kind of have a sound despite that. That's so interesting to me. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, especially in the past year, I mean, you said you've been going on walks, but how do you find inspiration now, and how is that different to how you found inspiration in the past?
I think, before I would sort of fit all of my writing into the touring and between rehearsals and around performances, and it was kind of, there was this pressure cooker of making something in all the spaces in between, and now suddenly there's a much wider space of time and a lot less kind of surprising inspiration from people or things or conversations. That's usually where I think my brain goes to, is you just, I don't know, you just start talking to people, or you hear something, and now it's I don't know, it's hard to say. The thing that I've been working on the last 2 days kind of obsessively is I'm building all in Logic, but I'm using this text by Anne Carson, who's a wonderful writer, thinker, essayist, translator, poet. And I'm thinking of the piece kind of painting, which is really how it's really how I started writing music. I think Partita which was now 10 years ago, was thinking about music as painting, and that's, I guess, kind of much more where I am, rather than normally if I'm writing stuff for string quartet or live players, I'm really thinking about the person playing and their experience of it, and people playing with each other and what it feels like for the, to latch into each other and to come out of it. And I think with the increased work in kind of working in a DAW, I'm working in a slightly different way.
That's so interesting to hear about kind of the visual rather than like the sort of ensemble being what you've been thinking about and looking at. And I just wonder, with your ensemble that you're in, or your ensembles that you're in, and the people that you work with, what is it like for you? Do you think of yourself performing your own music, or do you think of yourself as kind of like part of a process? What is that like for you? You talked about this kind of like the dynamics of the ensemble around you inspiring you. How does that feel? And do you kind of inhabit the role of composer, or do you become, how does that work?
Yeah, I think it depends on, it sort of depends on the meal that you're cooking, like how you think about the ingredients. I've recently been doing a project with So Percussion, which is a percussion quartet based in New York, and we have kind of a long relationship. I've written a couple of pieces for them more as like composer role and working collaboratively, but still kind of in charge of the music, in charge of what happens.
Yeah.
But a very collaborative kind of process. But then we wanted to make something that was truly collaborative, where I kind of erase my role as the composer and really become much more part of the ground of the ensemble. And so we were in a couple of months we'll release an album where it's the songs I'm singing and it's all really collaboratively written. In things like writing for string quartet is a weird hybrid, because occasionally I now play rarely now do I play, and never now in 2020, 21 do I play the violin with other people, but in the past I have, so I'm sort of thinking of myself a little bit part of the ensemble, but these days I'm much more removed and I tend to write for other groups, but I still have that sensation of playing together, which is really a big part of, I guess, sort of the moves that I choose to use in the piece and some of the sort of logistics of the engineering of it. I'm really thinking, I want to make music as essentially as a gift to players, to an audience. It's less about what can I do from the top, but what can I do from the inside, and then sort of design it from the top a little bit. That was really vague. I'm so sorry. But
no, that made total sense to me. So I don't know. Maybe it's like composer brain. Like that's so interesting. So interesting, because I think, some people think of being composer as being this kind of like top-down thing, and you're talking about being inside the ensemble, and even when you're composing for other people, feeling it physically as you write. That's something I really connect to as well. Like I used to play the oboe. It was a dark time in my past because I was pretty terrible, but I love the oboe, and I love playing and I love performing. And I've always felt that when I write, I want to, like you say, I want it to be a gift for the performers and for the audience, so that it's something communal. But at the same time, I have to try and like push myself to challenge and to go beyond what I personally would find comfortable. So like, how does that work for you? Do you ever kind of push? I've listened to your music and you do push the boundaries in so many ways, but it always sounds kind of like everybody is really enjoying performing it as well. So is there a level to which you kind of say, I want this to be uncomfortable, or I want this to be challenging? How does that work for you?
Yeah, there's comfort can mean different things. There's like a listening comfort and a physical comfort. For me, physical comfort is very, very important, because I don't know, people are more important than music, but the aural comfort is a concept that, as we all know, kind of shifts depending on the context. There are a few times where I've written something for a player. I remember writing it's an orchestra piece, and the concertmaster has to play this really, really high pizzicato that like sounds bad, but is just right. And we talked about it. I said, if you brought this down an octave, it would sound better. And I said, no, it actually needs to sound strained and picky and uncomfortable and not resonant. So I think those are things that I always want to play with. And the way that you cook, you use a certain spice that if you use too much of it, it is physically uncomfortable. But if you choose just the right amount in the right context, and it's telling us it's part of the story, it's delicious. So And then there's a question, I think, which I feel like you were hinting at, which is really interesting one about comfort level, like pushing your own personal creative boundaries, which I do think about a lot. And I that is probably one of the questions that people don't know that I ask myself constantly, which is sort of like, is it too easy, or is it, I mean, cliche is not really the word, or cheesy. That's one thing that I know that I have to question myself, because I like a lot of like delicious kind of pop harmonies and do things with them. But in a certain context, it could, if it goes too long or it's too cinematic, it feels like it doesn't sit, and it has too much sugar. So you're just sort of constantly asking that question of like, is this still sort of like satisfying on different levels? And that kind of engineering is really fun and interesting to me.
That's so great, because like actually when I was watching your one of your dance pieces that was on your website, and reading about the fact you've worked with filmmakers as well, as someone I've worked a lot with choreographers, and I know what their kind of musical references are and what sort of places they come from musically. And it's like anything else, when you are embarking on something new, you use the references that you have. So like if I'm talking to dancers, I only know a limited amount about dance. Even though I work with them all the time, I don't have their training and expertise. So I will say, oh, that reminds me of Crystal Pite, or oh, that reminds me of Martha Graham, or etc., etc. And for them, I think they have that same feeling when they're talking about music, that they say, oh, you know, I know Max Richter, or he's a common name to come up. They obviously know Stravinsky, and like I just wondered whether, just following on from what you said about kind of navigating between comfort and challenge, I really felt that with your writing for choreography, that you were making the dancers at ease, but then unsettling and creating surprise as well. So I really enjoyed that, and I just wanted to, that just really flows on from what you said. This is a little bit of a leap, the next question, but I'm just going to go for it. So if you could tell your past self about one piece or project you've made, what would you choose?
Oh, I didn't. I know. I saw this question. I was like, oh, that's such a good question. I hadn't really formulated an answer for it. It depends on how old am I?
Well, you choose. I mean, for me, the reason I asked this question is because sometimes when I'm feeling like really overwhelmed in the moment of everything that's going on, and thinking about all the different projects I have to do and wondering about the future, I sometimes try and stop myself and think, what would 12-year-old Anna think of what I'm doing now, or what I have done? And sometimes that makes me feel really confident, because I think, oh wow, like I've achieved so much. And sometimes it makes me stop and reconnect and reflect on maybe things that I'm worrying about that my 12-year-old self would have said, that's rubbish, you don't need to worry about that, it's not important. So that's why I asked you that question. It's quite a fun, playful, it doesn't have to be one piece or anything, it's just whatever you take from that. I
love that there's sort of that you chose 12, like this 12-year-old Anna is the person that you want to connect with. Like I wonder if we all, like, within that question is the question of like, what age would you choose to talk to yourself at? And I feel like 3 years
absolutely.
old is like the 3-year-old version is like the most open, and I would I guess I would love to tell the 3-year-old me about Allemande, which is the first movement of Partita, because I think that would be the right thing. But there's something that I was working on the last year that I would want to tell sort of, 15 or 20-year-old me, which is it's a piece called Graveyards and Gardens, which is with one single dancer named Vanessa Goodman, who's based in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And we both of us know Crystal Pite a little bit, and Crystal's seen the piece, and she had some, we're going to keep talking to her about just, some deep critical feedback.
Wow.
But it's something that's like, it's a evening, it's like right now it's 45 minutes, but it'll get a little bigger. Piece with lots of recorded sound. We have vinyl records and cassette players, and I've made a lot of music, in Logic that's synth heavy, and then there's lots of singing and violin. But it's meant to kind of tell a story about memory and archives, and the body as an archive. And I just feel like that way of thinking is something that I'm very excited about now, that I would want to remind earlier my earlier self to keep an eye towards. I've been thinking a lot about making sure that I don't get kind of stuck in just writing concert music for people to play, but like all the different ways of thinking and all the different ways that we experience sound in our lives, especially through recorded mediums, is just something that I would just say that, let me tell you about this thing.
That's amazing.
That's a great question. Yeah. I like it.
No, that's an amazing response as well, because like I'm really interested about what you say about music and recording, because I think you explore that a lot even in your live work as well. And just following on from working with choreographers, I wanted to ask you, like, who have your favorite collaborations been with, or maybe just like a highlight for you? For example, I know that you said you produced for Kanye West. I know you toured with him, and I listened to the one on your website which you've provided like a choir. Was that your ensemble? How did that work? Or maybe there's another collaboration that you've done that you really, really loved and is one of your highlights. Maybe it's with your houseplants. I don't know. Just like whichever one you want to choose.
I can talk a little bit about the Kanye one. We're not working together now because we have some political differences and it's complicated. But in the past, I really enjoyed it because he works in a way that's very different from me. When I first started, I didn't know Logic. I think he had just heard a performance of when I sang in Disney Hall with Roomful of Teeth. We did Partita, and he was there. We met backstage at intermission, and I really didn't know a ton about his music and his world, but that's really interesting to me. Is if I don't know something, let me just dive in and figure it out and say yes. Yeah. And for that, we was one of his producers had reached out to ask about doing some like arrangements for this big orchestra concert of 808s and Heartbreak, which is one of his albums. And I decided to just like, I don't know, take my time and not do an orchestra arrangement and then make this other thing. I don't know, it was a pretty bold move 6 years ago, but and so then I used for that sound is actually a Helicon Voice Live. I think I have right here underneath all of my stuff. Oh, there it is. Because Anna, you were asking about this before. This is the thing that I use as the like.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's a great. If you can kind of tweak your own patches, it's a wonderful. Oops.
It was a wonderful thing.
It was a wonderful. No, it's meant to be a stop box. It's really resilient. It's gone everywhere.
I've dropped my synths about 6 times this week. I'm not proud.
But it has it's essentially a harmonizer, but you can tweak it just a little bit so that then I feed MIDI into it and really play my voice like a choir, which is something that I've always really enjoyed doing. And so my work with that is really informed by my work with Roomful of Teeth, which is a choir, where I'm really also writing chords with particular vowel structures. So it has a certain like synth sound and then turns. So that was a really fun translation process of going from kind of really live vocal writing into something more synthetic, but really based in the organic voice. So I can sort of manipulate the timbres and the sounds with my voice. Anyway, so then I sort of built it around that. At that time, it was using working with a friend named Trevor Garekas, who's a wonderful composer and sound engineer. I said, Trevor, I don't know how to do anything. Like, I don't know how to do anything with my computer. How do I make this? And so he helped me kind of start recording that. And then I worked on Life of Pablo with Kanye and Yay, which is recorded in Wyoming. It's a pretty wild process. Definitely not organized. It's not like, oh, you know what you're doing and then you do it. It's just like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff. What do you feel? And then I'll kind of take it in, like lots of, unfinished tracks or little bits here and there. And just like if something kind of speaks to me, or I say like, oh, that's a really great scene for something, I might build something around it and I'll spend a whole day and I'll send it right back. And sometimes they like love it and sometimes you get no response, and that's okay. That's a really great lesson as a composer. You know, you just like make a whole big thing that you're proud of, and then say, oh, that's done, and it's gone.
So it's very collaborative. Yeah,
very collaborative.
I found that really interesting as well, because I collaborate a lot with dancers, writers, choreographers, filmmakers, anyone who wants to. But then, yeah, like with the world of pop music, whatever, you know, what does that even mean? What does genre even mean anymore? I think you're living proof of like the fact that genre doesn't have to be restrictive. But just, yeah, the collaboration suddenly becomes between all these different compositional voices, and like it is chaotic. I'm amazed, like it's just amazing to hear about that from your perspective, because like I'm so inexperienced in that field still, and like I've just started to observe that there are huge differences. And yeah, like maybe you're adapting to it so much more naturally because you already see yourself as this part of this process, like you were saying before. Just like one more question for now, I think, before we open up for
I know, but I wanted to go back to something you were talking about before about,
yeah,
like,
go for it, please do.
You were talking about just working with dancers and references, and this idea of reference points, which is like that's like a whole other conversation, is how do you, especially if it's a new collaboration and someone says, oh, the reference point is, you know, maybe Philip Glass or Stravinsky or Max Richter, and you want to also have that conversation but kind of be yourself within it, and how often all of our conversations are sort of built on these different shared references or not shared, and you try to come together to find something new. Anyway, I just wanted to talk to like a lot longer about that because it's very interesting.
Yeah, maybe with like some discussion we have with audience as well, some people might be interested in that too, because I think, yeah, it is a really difficult thing with collaboration. How do you hold on to like your voice and what you want to say while working with the project, and how do you kind of work with reference points that might be very different to what you actually want to say? Yeah, it's like a huge topic, isn't it? I just wanted to like give everyone a bit of warning that in like a couple of minutes we'll open up to the floor for questions. So if you're in the Zoom call, please click on the raise your hand button in the participants tab, and I'll pick some people to ask questions, and then you'll be unmuted so you can ask your question in person. And then if anyone's watching live on Facebook, you can post your message in the comments and we'll try and answer as many of those as we can. So I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you want to think of something to ask Caroline now. Maybe you want to follow on some of the topics Caroline's been talking about. So yeah, just like my final question is sort of, we've looked at the past, we've looked at like present, let's go to the future, let's be cheesy. So like you've got lots of things coming up at the moment, I know, linked in with that, like what do you still really want to make in the future without giving too much away, because obviously you want to keep things to yourself until you've made them as well, but like what going forward are you really excited about, and is there anything that you're kind of really hoping for in the future? Huge question, sorry. You can make it more specific if you want. If you just want to talk about like one project you're doing that you're really excited about, that's great as well. Just however you want to answer that.
Oh, sure. I'm like right now I'm looking at the thing that is just super duper in my mind is the Anne Carson poem opera thing short film, which I'm like making now, and we have to film in like 2 weeks, which is really exciting. And there's a singer named Ariadne Greif who I'm going to work with, and she has a very particular quality. Anyway, it's interesting to write for a particular person. There's a wonderful, I feel like he might be here somewhere, Sean Gandini, who's a wonderful juggler who's based in London. This is a project that we've been thinking about for a long time, and I'm excited to talk to him tomorrow about that. And his company worked with the Met Opera on Akhenaten with the jugglers in the back. Anyway, we want to have this idea of making something together, and I don't know what it is, but it feels like all the ingredients are delicious. So
ooh, wow,
that's what I'm excited about.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. I just wanted to like tease something out of you there. So I think we've got some questions. So Caroline can take a breath. Whew, thank you so much, Caroline. That's been absolutely
Thank you, Anna. You're such
wonderful.
it's really nice to talk with you. It's very easy to, yeah, anyway,
Oh,
I
I'm so pleased.
appreciate
I
it.
just wanted to make you feel comfortable on Zoom because we're on the other side of the world and it's very strange, but we've all got used to it somehow. So nice talking with you. So I just want to hand over to Devon Benelli to ask a question.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for presenting today. It was really, really great to hear you kind of talk about your own music. I'm really, really interested in kind of references and reference points, and something that's like been of increasing interest in my own practice is kind of using these reference points and kind of, manipulating them and turning them on their heads to really get people to kind of question what we think of when we think of these reference points. So I don't know, I was just really interested about what we ended on, and I would really love to hear what you had to say.
I kind of want to hear more of what you have to say. I think it's a really interesting point. I mean, there's different kinds of references, different ways of referencing things, and then of course maybe what you're starting to allude to is the content of the reference and why does somebody choose that? Why choose things have very particular cultural meanings and specific and very personal meanings. And I mean, for me, I'm kind of in this more recent piece with Vanessa Goodman. I was kind of interested in almost sort of bringing people into my own weird world of like things that I love and trying to create a map of memory for someone else to experience what I experience. But how are you thinking of references in your music?
Yeah, I guess I'm working on this piano piece right now, actually, that kind of manipulates these like overplayed romantic themes in a way. So I'm kind of like referencing Tchaikovsky 6 as this very like dramatic, heartfelt type of thing, but then kind of turning it on its head. I was really, really into, when everyone was going through like an emo phase, I was going through a Tchaikovsky phase. So I just was like really interested in kind of stretching that to its extreme and kind of, I guess it's a really interesting way to think about things, like inviting people into your own sound world and the sounds that you kind of appreciate.
Yeah, I think for me that's a way that I enjoy working, is like kind of from a place of like, I love this thing so much, how can I share my love of it with you in a kind of unironic way. And I think part of this is there's a the word that I never understand is postmodernism. I don't ever quite understand what it means, but I'm trying to get there. And we have this view of things like a postmodern approach to stuff, which is really deals with lots of references and things as objects, that tends to be viewed as this ironic kind of like negative, or like if you reference Tchaikovsky, it must obviously be in an ironic way. But what if that is something that you genuinely love and you just want to make something with it? I think it's a thought worth thinking about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very much.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. That was not said with any authority at all.
Absolutely, but I really appreciate that, and it gives me things to think about. Thank you.
Awesome. So we've got another question from Nina Whiteman.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for the chat today. It's been lovely to just hear people talking about creative things. I'm also a composer and vocalist, so that's kind of brings me to my question. I've got so many questions for you, actually, but I'd quite like to ask about all the different kind of vocal techniques that you explore in the partita, and whether they were kind of new to your ensemble or whether they came from other members of that ensemble, or just how that kind of arose, that incorporation of such a fascinating array of vocal sounds.
Sure. It was so this is a piece that was written for and alongside and part of the genesis of a group called Roomful of Teeth, which really began as a workshop in 2009, and I was one of the first people that was a part of it. And it was founded by Brad Wells, who's based actually not far from here. And Brad's idea was to invite practitioners of different singing traditions and techniques to kind of talk about what they do, to learn from them over a long period of time, and to talk about ways of healthily, using our voices in a way that's healthy, in ways that are different from the standard sort of bel canto or choral, sort of Western choral tradition. And also to not think of them as extended techniques, but think about them as the expressive possibility. And so we've worked with a lot of different wonderful different practitioners from different cultures. And I mean, I'll say that when early on, I think our approach to this was it was as a workshop and less as a kind of creative force that would, I mean, Partita was never meant to be known as much as it is. It was really just this piece that I wrote as experiments that I sort of made into something larger. And I think there are things in it that I am planning to change and will change, but the heart of it is this exploration of the voice. And for me particularly, I like thinking of speech and speech as music and all the like completely complex nutso things that we're doing with our voice all the time. Like, right, anyone who speaks it's far more complicated than singing. You're creating all these like very particular resonances and timbres with your tongue and your teeth. Anyway, so if you extend any one of those things that we do normally all the time, it becomes this wonderful instrument. And it's also, I like writing for the voice and for removal of teeth because everyone has this instrument inside of them. So that's what I would say about that. Thank you.
Great, yeah.
Sorry, Nina.
So I was just going to say, it's lovely when you have an ensemble. I also have an ensemble, to be able to just try out things and work in that kind of more collaborative sort of community minded way, isn't it, I guess? Yeah.
It's, yeah, Nina, it's really, I'm glad you brought that up again, because I think that's also a really big part of how that particular piece kind of came about. Was not written kind of linear, like I write the piece and then bring it in, but I said it really started from, I just want to hear everyone go, can you go like and then can you slide up, and then can we get to a D major chord perfectly at the top? And I thought, cool, I really love that. And okay, now how do I make that into a piece of music? And I would bring in things every day. So now, can I hear this chord on just like or could we do, what if one of the things that at the beginning of Saraband, which is the beginning, when I first started it, it was and it just felt, uncomfortable. Again, going back to the idea of physical comfort is really important. And it was like, oh, could we just kind of do something slightly different? And then Estelise, the top soprano, was doing this warm-up that her teacher had taught her, which is, she called Spaceship, where you go, and then you find the note. And I thought, oh, what if we go, and that was how that came about. So it was very much a part of like feeding off the energy and conversation in the room, and then folding it into a structure that felt that I got excited about.
Thank you.
That was brilliant. I loved getting some vocal demonstrations as well. I didn't want to like ask you to do that and put you on the spot, but it's just, I'm sure everyone wanted to hear some, because like that's just so much about that piece, and I think everyone's curious about your process as well. So thank you, Nina, for that question. I think we've got one from Robert Laidlow now.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, Caroline. Thanks for being with us. Thanks, Anna, for leading us through. It's been very enjoyable so far. I wanted to ask you a bit more about process and structure a little bit. Actually, this thought came to me when I was watching Dark on Netflix, and your music is on it. But it's only a little bit of your music, of course. It's just an excerpt. And I wondered about the structure of your music from that. And I wondered how you structure your music, and particularly with this string quartet album that came out recently that I was listening to, how much of your form is planner in advance, and how much do you think about form as compared to maybe workshopping elements? And how much will the structure of your pieces change as you go along, or in those pieces do you kind of have an idea of what you're going to do, and then you kind of work towards that? Yeah, I guess I'm basically asking about form and pacing and structure.
Yeah, that's That's great. Form is. I saw someone on Twitter talking about this recently too, in a way that I liked. I've never used the word form because I think when I was in school I never quite understood it. Like, analyze the form of this piece, and I thought I hear it as all these like sequence of wonderful moments. I don't really listen to a symphony that way, but I do listen for pacing in my music, and I think about pacing a lot, and I think pacing basically is form. But the rate at which you kind of get through one idea to the next, or if you're prepared for that thing. And as you were asking your question, I was thinking about, you asked about whether I sort of know there's a form change as I go along, and definitely, or I don't go in with a ton of planning, at least for the string quartet stuff, but I may go in with, it's like I have an idea for a house, and I know where the doors are, and I know where the sink is, and I know where some of the like really clear elements kind of are going to be, or like that I know where that part of the conversation, this node of the conversation is important, and then kind of getting to it and playing around it is the fun part. And that's a mysterious thing that I don't really know what happens, but it involves a lot of like listening to my own sense of pacing. It's like, a lot of the question is like, does this go on too long? And I think it's a question that I ask maybe too much of myself now. I think in 10 years I'm going to let things go really long, but right now I chop them up quite a bit because maybe I get bored. But also this idea of, I keep saying the word conversation, but it's really how I think of things. When you're talking to someone, especially someone you don't know, but you like get into a rhythm and you can have shared references, and then you get to a different idea. There's something I enjoy about that pace that I enjoy in music as well. But then there are other things, like you mentioned, like that excerpt of Partita that's in dark, or some of my stuff on my string quartet album, which are a little more cinematic, where it does live in a world for a longer period of time. And I guess it's all kind of it feels like a balance. I would never want to write, I don't know, I would, but right now I'm not writing pieces that just do one thing for a long time. There's always kind of there's a mix. The answer is, I think about a mix. Yeah. But yeah, there's a wonderful composer that I admire a lot, and I admire the music that comes out, but also her process, which is Anna Torvaldsdottir, Icelandic, and I think she does lots of drawings before she begins, which I find really wonderful. Like, she just is fully kind of like sketching out this piece, and then she makes it, which I think is just a wonderful idea, because it's so opposite from mine, which is much more like 3-year-old finger painting with like bits of dirt and sticks. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound that way, Caroline, at all. And thank you, Rob, for that question. That was so interesting. And we've got one from Adam Gorb now.
Yes. Hello. Very nice to meet you, Caroline. And I just read an interview with you online, which where you talk about yourself as a music writer rather than a composer. I don't necessarily want you to unpick that, but do you somehow see what you visualize as a composer as somehow a bit different from what you do?
No, I think I probably wouldn't want to pick that apart too much. I do sometimes call myself a composer, but it feels there's something about there are other kind of worlds of music making where they don't use the word composer, or it means something very specific, whereas maybe to more the sort of classical world, composer is a lot more broadly applied. And so I think I try to gravitate towards like music writer or musician, or something that that has less kind of specific meaning in a lot of other music worlds. For instance, like to say I'm a composer, but in the like hip hop or pop world would just sort of has a different ring, has a different sound to it. So music writer feels, I don't know, I kind of liked it. But I thank you for asking that, and I probably shouldn't pick apart that too much.
I won't say anything else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So we have one more question. Just time for one more. Sorry about that. I'm sure you've all got lots and lots of things to ask, but we've got one more question from Callie now, please.
Hi, Caroline. So I'm a producer, so I come from my music from Logic, from that sort of point of view, and then I'm interested in translating those electronic ideas into into the voice or whatever. I wondered whether you've got any VSTs or anything that you really like to use apart from the TC Helicon.
Oh yeah. For vocal stuff I use the Helicon for sort of mocking things up, and then I use just a lot of different pianos. I'm really into detuned pianos now. There are a couple of kind of epic deep synths that I really love, but then I can't find a good translation of those deep resonant percussive synths into acoustic music. I think there's an idea that it could become an orchestra, but it's never really as satisfying as that deep. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. That's what I can't get rid of the electronics in my music, because there's something that, the amalgamation of an orchestra and a PA, why would you choose if you can have both?
I know sometimes it's a logistical thing, and the players have a certain feeling about it, but I think it is objectively true that the orchestra cannot make the same sound that those deep synths can, and the deep sub. It's just physically impossible for the instruments, but there's all the things that it can do. So there's wonderful limitations in what if there is no electronics, and then what can you do, and what shape does that put your brain into? And I think also I've been embracing just different sides of my music making, or different worlds to live in, and saying it's okay for, what if, just saying I don't have that thing, but what do I do within this small world? Whether it's solo violin or something else. But I grabbed onto that because I think about this a lot as well. Yeah. But as far as VSTs, I just have a certain little things that I go to, but no vocal ones that I've worked with yet.
Well, if you've got a pen, I've got a suggestion.
Yes.
Yeah. What is it? I think it's GMR Tools. Yeah, GMR Tools. They're amazing. And also, what's the other one? Fab Filters. They make everything sound great.
I'm just going to jump in, Callie, because we're about to wrap up now, but I love that we've gone into the technical dark black hole of producing, which I'm also wrapping my head around at the moment. I love it. It's just infinite possibilities. Love it. Caroline, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up? We're just so honored to have you here. We're sorry we can't have you in person, but it's just great to have you as a guest for RNCM. I'm sure lots of students and staff been inspired to watch you on the live stream, even if they weren't here in Zoom. So Rob said next time in person. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate all of your generous questions. I really enjoyed today. Thank you for having me.
Well, we just thank you so much, Caroline, for being here. It's such an honor, as I said. One of the small silver linings of this year is being able to have people as guests on Zoom who might otherwise not have time to fly over, or however it happens. So we're really grateful for you offering so many generous insights into your composing world and your creative world. Thank you to everyone who's joined us in the Zoom and asked such wonderful questions, and thank you to everyone who's watched on the live stream. I hope that everyone has lots to think about now and goes and checks out more of Caroline's work online. Thanks, everybody.